afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for 10 lessons from 30 years in adult education. We welcome everyone to the webinar, and I want to thank our generous sponsor, Burlington English, and Robert Breitbart is with us today. So, Robert.
Well, thanks so much, Bethel, and to all the great friends I see in the chat, a lot of familiar faces. Yeah, Robert Breitbart here, Director of Educational Partnerships, and you're in for a real treat. Not only is there powerful information, but it's delivered with great joy from Steve Schmidt here. So you're genuinely in for a treat. And as I mentioned to Steve, I'm going on well over 30 years in adult education. So can't ask for being luckier than that. And my biggest reflection possibly is how, from 1990, we've moved on to recognizing that, the folks we serve just maybe not just want to learn English, just get their high school equivalency, but, they want more. And particularly with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, we can give them more. And we can get our learners even taking their very first steps with us, future focused and early. And so I love with Burlington English that not only do we do reading, writing, listening, speaking, grammar, you name it, and everything teachers would need for projectable lessons and everything students would need to continue learning long after the standard classroom has finished. We get students future focused on what their next step beyond ESL might be. And so this is even from our Burlington core. I like to say that I was a fairly good ESL teacher back in the day, but I wasn't a trained career counselor. So I don't know if you'd put curricular standards in front of me that talked about helping learners understand career pathways and exactly what a career pathway is, that I would have done a really great job. So with Burlington English, we put everything in the teacher's hands and the learner's hands to once again know that the building they're in, the Zoom they're on, the program that you provide is so much more than just coming to learn English and getting your high school equivalency. And so many of you, particularly in leadership, you put together IETs, you put together job training, post-secondary. Well, gosh, you don't want to do all that work and get a learner in there and say, blood, nobody told me about blood, in health science. So I love the fact that if you're familiar with like Department of Labor, ONET, and things like that, that we've taken and really ESLized things like that and made it approachable for learners at beginning, intermediate, advanced levels to do the kind of career exploration. So again, there's adding purpose to their learning and contextualization and ready for their next steps. And what I love is, as you can see, all the learners build a career pathway portfolio. And from what we know on the research on change, hey, goals, you set goals, you put them down, you have such a better chance of actually realizing them. So every one of your learners at all levels can create a portfolio of what their next steps are. And if, again, I'm a teacher, I might not know about things like certificates and apprenticeships. And with Burlington English, we provide teachers with everything they need to know to introduce concepts like that. And like I say, everything gets put down in a digital portfolio to motivate learners, help them persist in your programs and reach their goals. So I've got dozens and dozens of colleagues all around the country who'd love to help out and get you started on these next steps. So please do that. Reach out, burlingtonenglish.com/contact. And with that, I know I've got my popcorn ready. So I'm going to sit back, relax, and enjoy this fantastic webinar by Steve. Back over to you, Bethel. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. We are so appreciative of our partnership with Burlington English. And now I'm going to hand it over to Steve Schmidt, I'm sorry. And he is our new presenter coach with COAPE. So you're going to see him at the conference as well. Steve?
Well, thank you so much, Bethel, and thank you, Robert. We were highly entertained earlier today with Robert doing his pre-show stand-up routines. I've been laughing for the last 15 minutes, and we were sharing stories from the old days because we are contemporaries, but we still both have our hair, let the record show. So I want to welcome you, give you a very warm welcome today to the webinar, 10 Lessons from 30 Years in Adult Ed. And as I mentioned several times inside the chat, there is a handout for today that you're invited to follow along with. And I've put the link for that in the chat, a bit.ly link that'll take you to a Google Drive that will have that handout. So I invite you to follow along. It's not 100% necessary to have that. You can still certainly follow along, but it's good to have that to follow along a little bit better. So what are we going to do today? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about some things I've learned during a 30-year career in adult ed. I do not promise to do all 10 lessons. I was saying earlier, I've only gotten through all 10 of them one time ever. So usually if I do 7, it's pretty good. So bear with me. We'll do as much as we can. I want to try to make this as interactive as possible and just get you thinking about some ways that we can apply these best practices, these lessons in our own context. So please introduce yourself in a chat. A number of folks have done this already. And what I'm going to ask you to do, you can do 1 or 3 of these things. Tell us a little bit, if you haven't already. I know many have told us about where they're based. But if you've done that already, maybe talk about how long you've been in adult ed. Maybe you've been in longer than 30 years. It seems everywhere I go, I feel young because I see people. I'm in Atlanta at the Georgia Fall Adult Ed Conference, and someone was talking that they had been in the field for 40 years. So that made me feel young and made me feel good. And I invite you also to talk about, what are your expectations for today? What do you hope to learn from today's webinar? So thank you in advance for putting that in the chat. And I do see a number of familiar faces from across the country, and so glad that you're here. So I can honestly say that this webinar took me 30 years to create, and all I can say to that is, man, I wish I had billed by the hour before creating it, because a lot of hours have been spent, believe me, in thinking and in talking and wondering and worrying and all of the above about adult ed over the years. And I wish I could tell you that I had all the answers. And I can't say that in all humility. I can say that I have learned some things over the years, which I'm going to share with you today. And I would invite you, whether you've been in adult ed for 1 week or for 45 years, if you have any advice you'd like to offer your colleagues, please go ahead and put that in. I've often found through this particular workshop or webinar that the advice that people have offered has been fantastic. So please don't hesitate to do that and put any advice that you would like to offer inside the chat, and I will thank you in advance for that. So sometimes people think being an adult educator is really easy, and I would say no. So think it's easy to be an adult educator? Well, all you have to do is teach an engaging hands-on lesson to an ever-changing classroom of students ranging in age from 16 to 86. The lesson should be accessible to students whose reading, math, and language skill levels range from grade level equivalent 0 to 12.9. Your lesson needs to be aligned to the college and career readiness standards for English language arts and literacy and mathematics. It should also be contextualized towards students whose career fields include emergency medical technician, construction trades, welding, certified nurse, business office, computer programming, cosmetology, diesel mechanics, electrical tech, industrial maintenance, surgical tech, and 2 new programs you don't know about yet. Also, please integrate soft skills and career readiness training to ensure workplace success and make sure your students achieve those measurable skill gains. Good luck. So is that easy? I don't think so. I think what we do is incredibly challenging. And I always laugh when people think that this is an easy field to go in. It is far from that. And I admire and say thank you to everyone who's on our webinar today for the work that you do. I know how hard it is, having been involved with it. And thank you for the work you do. You are making a difference. If you are of a certain age, you may remember Jeff Foxworthy, who was, I think, especially big back in the 90s, maybe early 2000s. And he had something that was, you might be a redneck if, and then he would go and talk about characteristics of a redneck. Well, being in the field for a while, I have decided to adapt that. And so my take on Jeff Foxworthy is you might be an adult educator if, okay, so I'm going to run a couple here. Let's see if they resonate. You might be an adult educator if you know what all these initials mean: WIOA, GED, HiSET, HSE, ESOL, ABE, AHS, NRS, TABE, CASAS, CCRS, and MSG all mean. So congratulations if you know all the initial land, and there's more than what's in there. So what else? You might be an adult educator if you were hired 2 hours before your first class met. Anybody do that? I wasn't hired 2 hours before my first class met, but I did hire, when I was a local program administrator, I did hire some instructors very close to the time when their first class met. So that definitely happens. Okay, got a couple more. Are we ready? You might be an adult educator if you can work with 12 different students who are working on 12 different things all at once. So we could do it. We definitely could do it. Bring it on. We could work with 20 students if we needed to. So that's definitely the test of a great adult educator. Let's see, and I think I've got one more. You might be an adult educator if you're proud graduates wearing an orange jumpsuit under their cap and gown. So thank you, prison educators, whether you're teaching in a jail, detention center, state facility, Federal Bureau of Prisons, whatever you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing with our inmate students. Appreciate that. Our incarcerated students. Oh, and then last but not least, you came into adult ed by accident, but you wouldn't leave because you found your purpose. And I know that was true for me. I didn't set out to become an adult educator. I had taught high school for a couple of years prior to this, but man, I am so glad I came into an adult ed and so glad I found my purpose in it. Okay, so been thinking a lot about what we mean as adult educators and how we function as adult educators. And there's something called kintsugi, which I may have slightly mispronounced, kintsugi, which has been getting a lot of publicity lately. But what it is it's a Japanese art form where one takes a broken piece of pottery and puts it together. It is glued back together, but it is done in such a way where it is made better. It is made new and improved. All those breaks in the pottery have been put together and put a gold inlay over to make it even more beautiful. And I think that's what we do every day as adult educators. We take students whose lives have been broken and we help them make their lives to be new and improved. So that's what I love about adult ed, and that's what keeps me going and gets me out of bed every day to do this. So thank you again for however you may be involved inside our field. So let's talk about some lessons. The first lesson I want to talk about, and again, if you have the handout, great. I've put that link in the chat several times. The first lesson is face the fear and do it anyway. And this is something that I have worked on and battled throughout my working career about facing the fear. And I know for me, the very first time that I did a local professional development at my program, I was scared to death, but I faced the fear and did it anyway. Remember the very first time I presented at our state conference, I was scared to death, but I faced the fear and did it anyway. I remember the very first time that I presented in another state, in Georgia at the 2012, I think it was, Georgia Fall Conference. I was scared to death, but I faced the fear and did it anyway. Remember the very first time I presented at a COABE conference back in 2012, I think it was in Norfolk, Virginia. I was scared to death, but I faced the fear and did it anyway. And recently had the experience of giving my first keynote, and you probably imagine what I'm going to say. He's going to say, he was scared to death, but I faced the fear and did it anyway. And so there's a picture of me during the first keynote address that I did. So fear is something that we really face a lot of times, and especially as we're looking at all the changes in the field and looking at new innovations and integrating workplace skills and career awareness and all these things that we're asked to do. I saw fear, especially in my career back in 2019. I was working at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina, and we were providing professional development to North Carolina adult educators across the state. And it so happened that our budget was being cut, and I really did not know what to do. I dearly love the program, but I know many who are on our webinar today have faced this situation where budget cuts are really a fact of life in our field. And so I wasn't sure what to do. Thankfully, I did have enough time in working for the state so that I could retire. But then, retirement income was about half of what I was making before. And I had bravely told my wife, well, maybe I can work as a consultant and I can supplement our income through doing this. And I wasn't sure it was going to work. It was like the picture here. I felt like I was jumping off a cliff into the unknown. But thankfully, feeling very blessed, I've had the opportunity to work in 11 different states over the years doing various things, and am so thankful that I had that opportunity. At the time, I was not happy that my position ended and the budget cuts were in place, but I'm so thankful it happened now because it really forced me out of my comfort zone and have had so many rich experiences over these past 4 years that I would not have had that not happened. So you'll see there on page 2 of the handout about the 5 truths of fear, and I will put again that link. The link is there in the chat. I put it in probably at least 6 or 7 different times. So that bit.ly link, bit.ly /COAB 923, you will find the handout in there. So, anyway, the 5 truths of fear is something that I've come to know recently, and I love those. Dr. Susan Jeffers has come up with those in her book, which is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I take that as Face the Fear, pretty much the same thing. But I love what she says about fear. And I used to think that I was the only one who experienced fear, but I know that that is not the case, and that everyone experiences fear. Even people that look like they have it all together, everyone experiences fear. And she says part of her truths of fear, the fear will never go away as I continue to grow. That's one of her truths. She also says the only way to get rid of fear is doing something. You go out and do something about it. And she also says the only way to feel better about myself is to go out and do it. And she also says, not only am I going to experience fear whenever I'm on unfamiliar territory, everybody experiences fear, that fear of the unknown. We all experience that. And probably my favorite one is the one we see here on the screen, that pushing through fear, facing the fear, is a whole lot less frightening than living with that underlying fear that comes from helplessness. I hate that feeling. I would much rather do something to face the fear, push through that fear, than face that terrible underlying fear. So thank you, Dr. Susan Jeffers, for your 5 truths of fear there. I'm going to quote now a very famous educational scholar, Chip Gaines. Are we familiar with Chip Gaines? He was the home renovation guy on HGTV. Fixer Upper, I think, was the name of his TV show, and I think they've got now their own network, and they do several other things as well. I was reading his book called Capital Gains a while back, and I love his quote here. He says, I refuse to let my life be driven by fear of what others might do or what happened to me. Absolutely love that. And in the book, he relates a dinner party that he attended at one point in time with a group of close friends. Now, these are people that he's known for years. And he posed a question to the group, and he said, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Simple question. What would you do if you weren't afraid? And he said he sat back And he heard stories that his friends were telling. Again, these are people that he knew for years, about goals they had, dreams they had, visions they had of things that they would do if they weren't afraid. And he was just blown away to hear all these wonderful things that his friends were planning. And I think we're so much like that. There's a great quote, so many of us lead lives of quiet desperation. We do have all these dreams that we'd like to do, but it's fear that holds us back from doing that. And so I'm going to invite you, please, in the chat, how do you deal with fear? What would you do if you weren't afraid? If you want to be especially brave and put it out there among our 144 participants, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And do you have any advice to offer, since we're talking about the lessons from 30 years? And I have been neglecting the chat, so I'm going to go back into the chat and see here. Let's see. And thank you, Geraldine, for putting the handout link in better format than what I did. I appreciate that very much. So let's see here. So I'm going to invite you again in the chat. How do you deal with fear? What would you do if you weren't afraid? And if you have any advice, again, no matter how long that you have been involved. Let's see. Lisa talks about meditation. Love it. Gardening, painting. I would open my own business and move across the country. Cool. Well, Lisa, I hope that you get the chance to do that. Valeria, prayer. Absolutely. I'm 100% with you. Apply for dream. Good jobs. I hope you do that, Angela. I'll just do it anyways. Great, Christine. Go, go, go. Let's see. Oh, Rebecca mentions I had to admit to myself that I'm not perfect and never will be. There we go. And then I asked for help, and allowing me to be vulnerable has been really rewarding, because that's how I've learned the most. Oh, that's beautiful, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Convert fears into positive energy. Wonderful, Jeremy. Beautiful. Let's see. Kim practices yoga. Ruth, and I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. Let's see, breaks things down into smaller pieces and just takes it one step at a time. Yeah, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Let's see, Kelly practices in a mirror, and I'm sure your presentations are always wonderful. Heather wants to write a book. Good, do it. And let's see, Carrie says, I want to teach part-time. Good. And being a gig worker, Carrie, I would highly recommend that. It's nice not to be in the 8 to 5 grind and to be able to set your own schedule. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And still, please put that advice in there if you haven't had the chance to do that yet. All right. So let's move on. So my second lesson, and if you have the handout, and thank you again, it looks like we've got that, is to thine own self be true. And I love this quote. This one is actually one from the Wayback Machine that comes from Hamlet. And in Hamlet, the character Polonius said, this above all, to thine own self be true. And so I had to face this a number of times in my career, and we really face this every day with not just work-related things, but in all aspects of our life. We need to be true to ourselves. And so the story that I'll relate is that, I taught for many years as an instructor, and I had the opportunity to move into administration some years ago. And I became the administrator of our local adult ed program. And I would say, gosh, if you're give your program administrator a hug the next time you see them. It is such a challenging job. And these folks are the unsung heroes of adult ed. It is so challenging to find great quality instructors and work with community partners and make sure classes are meeting the needs of students. It's a constant challenge. So after about 5.5 years of administration, one of the things I was tasked with always was going out and visiting classes. We had to do class verification forms. And so I'd be sitting in the back of the class watching, and I kept hearing this voice in my head saying, go back and teach, go back and teach. And I was so wanted to get up so many times and go back in front of the classroom and teach again. And so I had an opportunity in 2010 to get back into teaching and professional development when I took the job at Appalachian State. And I will be open, honest, and transparent. I took a $10,000 pay cut to do this. And we know in adult ed, there's not a whole lot of thousands of dollars to go around, but I needed to do this to be true to myself, and I never regretted it. I was so thankful for the opportunity to do this, because that was what was really feeding my soul, and putting those purchase order numbers on these budget sheets was not feeding my soul. So I'm so thankful that I made that change, as hard as it was to do at the time when we relocated to move to Boone. It was a big change and a big upheaval, but I'm so thankful I did that. Part of this as well, being true to your own self, really cuts to the core of who we are as adult educators. As adult educators, we so want to help our colleagues, our students, everyone that we come in contact with, but a lot of times we do this at the expense of ourself. And I love this quote. I've seen it attributed to a number of people. I don't know if it was from Penny Reed or from who, but the quote is, "Don't set yourself on fire trying to keep others warm." It will not work. It will definitely not work, and it will just serve to make ourselves miserable. I was in Arizona 2 or 3 weeks ago at their fall conference in Tucson, and I'm bad with eavesdropping. I was overhearing a couple people talking at another table, and this one person said, yeah, they asked me to stay on in my current job until they could hire someone else. And it's been 8 months. And then she went on to talk more about it. So I was thinking, you stayed on this whole job for 8 months? Oh my gosh. Don't set yourself on fire trying to keep others warm. And if I was doing this live, I would have all of us stand up and practice saying no to trying to please everyone. But you can still do this. If you're a people pleaser, raise your hand, and I'm going to read both hands, because that had described me for so many years. And I guess people are raising their hands here virtually. And it's so hard, because that is who we are, again, as adult educators. We so desperately want to do that, but we can't. The more times we say yes to other people, the more times that we are saying no to ourselves. And that is not being true to ourselves and our mission. And that saps energy and makes it much harder for us to be able to be successful in that area of life, which we've been called to do. So say no to those things. If your director comes and says, "Hey, why don't you become the site coordinator and be the mentor for these 12 new instructors that we've hired," and you're already up to your eyeballs and alligators, practice saying no. Practice saying, "Oh, I wish I could do it. Thank you for asking me. Really appreciate that, but I just don't have the bandwidth to do this right now." So I'd say, say no as you need to, but practice saying yes to some things if you're able to do it and have the time to do it that scare you. Maybe if you examine your motives. Why are we saying no? Why are we saying yes? If we're saying no because this scares us, let's work on that. I was asked to serve as the presenter coach for COAB starting this year. And when I first got that offer, I was like, oh, I'm not sure that I can do it. So I thought, well, I would really love to give it a try, and I'm going to give it a try. So I said yes to this thing that scared me. A couple years ago, I was asked to serve as moderator for the Links reading and writing group, and I felt totally unworthy to do it. That imposter syndrome, oh man, have that in spades. And I thought, these people are experts. There's no way that I can do this. And but I said yes, because I said I want to challenge myself and I want to give this a try. And I'm so glad I did. It has been such an enriching experience. So I encourage you to say yes to those things that scare you. So once again, please, in the chat, what does it mean for you personally to be true to yourself? And what I found in webinars a lot of times is using a sentence starter is a great way to help people in the chat. And so I've given you a sentence starter. Being true to myself means fill in the blank. So you can fill that in inside the chat. Or again, if you want to offer your best advice from your from 1 day to 50 years in adult ed, please offer that advice, and let me check the chat and see what's going on here. Let's see. Ross says, oh, so she talks about Susan Jeffers' book. Wonderful. She went back to college at age 50. Good for you. Way to go, Roz. Way to go. Let's see. Jackie mentions being true to your values. Absolutely. And follow them as you advocate for students. Wonderful. Let's see. Jeannie took an assertiveness class. I could see that was an assertive comment there. Let's see here. All right, what else do we have? Durin, it's never too late. I'm not sure what that means. It's never too late. Let's see. My adult children pushed me and helped me get out of a rut selling insurance. All right, way to go, Jeannie. Let's see. Good. Being true to myself, Kim says, using the 300-hour yoga teacher training. Wow, that's a lot of training. Good for you, Kim. Good for you. Let's see. Wenzy says, out of my comfort zone, stepped into unknown territories. Good, 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 good. Ruth says, being true to myself, letting my values guide decisions and actions. That's beautiful. Sight spinner. Okay, I gave it a try. I hope I was close there, Ruth. I used all my alphabetic skills. Let's see. Oh, working to fill your days with joy. Durin, that's very poetic. I love that. Speaking truth to power. Oh, wow, that is so brave to do, Susan. Good for you. Let's see. Christine says only when you know you can do it. Believe in yourself and your students. Absolutely. Helping learners be true. Fatima, the wisdom to find the difference. Well, yeah, when to say no, when to say yes. Fatima, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, thank you. Oh, Patricia, good. Doing some self-care, scheduling some days off. Wonderful. Oh, and Lisa, giving myself permission to do what I want unapologetically. Very beautiful. Oh, good. And Vasilika, never underestimate the value of yourself. Thank you, everyone. Oh, wow. We're getting some great participation here in the chat. All right. Well, let's move on to the next lesson, which if you do have the handout is on the bottom of page 3. And this lesson is beware of the danger of a single story. Now, this lesson is based on an amazing TED Talk that I saw a number of years ago. Chimamanda Adichie did this wonderful TED Talk that talked about the danger of a single story. And there is a live link to that in the handout where you can go and watch that TED Talk. It's about, I don't know, 12 minutes or so. It is well worth the time. It's a brilliant TED Talk. And she talks about stereotypes inside that TED Talk. She's a Nigerian. She talked about a lot of stereotypes that are present when people are thinking about the continent of Africa and the various countries inside there. And she says the problem with stereotypes is not that they're untrue, but that they're incomplete. And they make one story become the only story. And she talks about stereotypes where we think about things in Africa, but not neglecting some of the background and the history that was involved to create some of the issues that are there today. And it's very, very thought-provoking TED Talk. Would highly recommend that. So I think a lot of times, and I know I am guilty of this, have been guilty of this, that we believe many times a single story about our students. And Sudie Whalen, who works at the American Institute of Research, has this wonderful quote. And she says, I think in adult ed, we're often guilty of being dismissive of our learners, partially because we value our own expertise, but also because of the biases that we hold against folks whose educational backgrounds and income levels don't necessarily match our own. Anytime we make program level decisions without including our learners, we're dismissing their lived experience and the expertise that they could provide. And I think, Sudie, you have hit the nail on the head. I think of my dear friend, Dr. Carmen Stewart, who works at Seeds of Literacy in Cleveland, Ohio. And they have student ambassadors in their program, and they run a number of focus groups where, not only do they bring adult students together to share their expertise about programming and decisions about how they run their program, but they pay their students not just a chocolate chip cookie, but they realize chocolate chip cookies don't pay the rent, and they actually do pay their students money to participate in these focus groups, and they're getting a lot better lot better, being more responsive with their learners, since their learners are included in program level decision making. And I think that's definitely the way that we should go there. Patch Adams, if you may remember the 1998 movie that starred about his life, he is a doctor. He is a social activist also, and he talks about the system of healthcare in the U.S. And he says, if you treat a disease, you win or you lose. But if you treat a person, I guarantee you that you'll win no matter what the outcome. And I love this. And I've taken the Patch Adams principles and related it to our student. And that is, if you treat our learners as a problem to be fixed. In other words, we're just seeing their skill deficits in reading, math, writing, speaking English. If you treat learners as a problem to be fixed, you'll both lose. But if you treat learners as unique human beings with gifts to share to the world, you will both win. And I think that is so true. And maybe we do this subconsciously, that we maybe don't value our learners because all we see is their skill deficits. And that is something that I have worked on in my life to make sure that I don't have that single story going on. So I think the single story is definitely something there that we need to consider. And a lot of times we work in that single story without realizing it. And I love a quote from longtime adult educator Kate Nunsuch, who said, "There's no better way to show respect to a student than to listen. And if you listen, learners will teach you how to teach them." And that is so, so very true. So think about, what single stories do we believe, maybe about our learners, or maybe about a colleague, or maybe about a community partner, and how can we get beyond that single story that we might see or believe? Okay, another lesson. Again, if we have the handout, and thank you again for the one who included the live link to that handout. What I've learned over the years is that reading is the key to the whole deal. When I first started in adult ed, in September of 92, I knew very little about teaching reading. And I was basically what the research calls a librarian teacher. I would hand out books. Oh, you're having trouble reading that book? Oh, here's another book. And yeah, go ahead and you read the exercises on page 12, answer questions 1 through 4. Oh, that book's not working out for you. Hey, we got another book, or we've got this computer program, or whatever. And none of what I was doing, though, was teaching reading. And it was really not until I got involved with the STAR, the Student Achievement in Reading Initiative, which is a nationwide initiative that any state can participate in for free, that I really learned about what it meant to teach reading. And I know some of our adult educators come in with a K-12 background and were trained in how to teach reading, but I know many are not, and really don't know how to teach reading. And a lot of times the professional development we give up front to our new instructors doesn't include information about how to teach reading. But the information is out there, and we can certainly learn and grow inside that information. I want to challenge you with this, what I have up on the screen, and I'm going to give you a minute or two of silence. And what I would like you to do is read what you see on the screen. This is at your reading level, and I'm going to be asking you some questions based on this particular passage. So I'll be quiet for a moment, and I'm going to invite you to read this passage and be ready to answer some questions about it. Okay, well, I'm feeling nice today, and so I will not ask you any questions about this reading passage. There's a point to this. You might think Steve has lost it. What's going on? What are we talking about here? So what's the point of this? What is the point of this? What's the point of this reading on heavy metal? Please put in the chat. Oh, let's see. I'd like these comments in the chat. Patricia was saying, great trick to see student as an Albert Einstein, whose talents were not known during his school age years, but became apparent later. Very good. I love that. I love that. Let's see, Rebecca, thank you for that comment about how much you've learned from your students. So what's the point? Sheila says vocabulary, but or Sheila, I'm not sure which, I think it's Sheila. Sheila, so what is the point about vocabulary? Camara says complex clues help so much. Sophia, when you learn is when they cannot decode words. I think we're getting on something, Wendy, thank you. To show us what students go through. Good. Yeah, I've seen that video that you're referencing, Rebecca, about how English sounds to non-English students. It's funny. Yeah, I think we're really getting this. What I had hoped in what everyone said is certainly a great outcome for this. What I was hoping to prove here was the importance of vocabulary in reading. And a lot of times that is a strategy we try to teach learners about, using context to get the meaning. But if there's so many words that we don't know, using context to get the meaning isn't going to help. And from what I know from the STAR, that's only really context clues are really more effective for our learners that are above the ninth grade equivalent, and not necessarily a good strategy for our intermediate or lower level emerging readers. But just think about this. This is maybe a dramatic point, but for a lot of our learners, this is what reading is like. And the vocabulary is a huge issue, or I should say lack of vocabulary is a huge issue for so many of our learners. And so, what do we do about that? Well, teaching vocabulary is one thing we need to do in order to help our learners. The great news is that all 4 reading components, that is alphabetics, decoding words, phonics, sight words, those things, alphabetics, fluency, the ability to read in a conversational tone at a rate fast enough to make meaning, vocabulary, the words that students know, and comprehension, being able to understand an author's ideas. All of these 4 reading components can be assessed and they can be taught. Too often, all we're doing is giving students a TABE test or a CASAS test. And while we can get some helpful information from those, they really do not tell us a lot about, oral reading fluency. They do not measure. A lot of them don't measure alphabetic skills. We may get a little bit with silent reading, vocabulary comprehension, but we really get a limited picture. And for a lot of our learners, they really have gaps in 3 out of the 4 of those areas, or all 4 of those areas. But we can assess those. Yes, it does take a little extra time and effort to do, but yes, it is well worth it to make sure that we're providing students the instruction that they need. And this is one of the fundamental tenets of the STAR, the student achievement in reading, that I've been mentioning throughout the webinar this afternoon. And a live link is in that the handout of an assessment tool that one can use to assess all 4 of the components of reading. So would certainly invite you to use that, because we're really, as my friend, the late great Dr. John Strucker would say, if you don't know where your learners stand in all 4 of those reading components, you are flying blind in the classroom in terms of instruction, and especially if you're dealing with that intermediate level learner, that grade level equivalent 4 to 9, which form the majority of all adult ed students, though of course your class may vary. So that's the good news. We can assess these components. But again, STAR commercial, if your state is not involved in the student achievement and reading, get involved. At lunch today, they were telling me that Georgia has 1 STAR trained instructor in every program across the state. Good for you, Georgia. I wish we could say that was be the case. And I know other states do as well, who may be on our webinar today. but good for you if your state is doing STAR. And if not, again, this training is free, and you can get this together. They can set you up with a state or national trainer to make this work, but it's well worth the time. It's a lengthy, involved training, but teaching someone to read is lengthy and involved as well. So definitely well worth the time to do. There are other resources in addition to it on Links, which is a free course. All one has to do is sign up. There's some great courses, teaching adults to read, and it offers instruction for how to teach beginning level readers, intermediate level readers, and there's a separate course for teaching advanced level readers at the high school equivalency level. Free course, wonderful. Some of the greatest research is in there, well worth the time to do. And again, on the handout, there is a link to those courses. So speaking of Links, I will put a plug into that. Links is the Literacy Information and Communications System. This is sponsored by Octay, which is the federal government form of the U.S. Department of Ed for adult ed. And Links, if you're interested in learning more about what's the latest and greatest with teaching in various facets of adult ed, you'll want to join the Links community. There are 13 Links communities, including career pathways, including our two newest communities in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in civics, education, and citizenship. But links.ed.gov, one can go create an account and join one or more of these communities. And in the interest of full disclosure, I do moderate the reading and writing group. So love to have you on Links. It has helped my professional development tremendously. Okay, so I'm going to invite you in the chat, please. How do we move away from seeing students as a problem to be fixed? And if you don't have issues with that, great. What's working well with reading instruction in your classroom or program? Or again, if you have advice from however long you've been in the field, please put that in the chat. Let me see if I can get caught up with the chat. Oh, good. And thank you for someone put in the SABES link for assessment. And thank you so much for doing that, because they do some great work there in SABES, rather. Okay, let's see. Oh, good. And Kamara said she took the Links class and it was really good. So don't take it from me. Take it from Kamara, because she knows what she's talking about. But Jasmine, if you're interested in STAR, on my handout, there's my email address. Shoot me an email and I'll be glad to connect you with the folks that can help you, your state, get connected to that. Be happy to do that. Let's see. Thank you, Maya, about including students in the conversation. Let's see. Angela's talking about using current events. Let students lead in learning. Wonderful. Let's see, Fadel talks about using current events from newspapers and things. Okay. And Cynthia's about equitable options for students. Good for you. Good for you. Yeah, asking students what they want to learn. Wonderful. Yeah, good. And so Donna is putting a plug in for STAR. And Jennifer's mentioned about the importance of building relationships. That's fantastic. Oh, good. Wow, we're getting some good stuff. Thank you, Erica. That is beautiful. And let's see, Jean mentions about listening to students as well. Great. Thank you so much. Continue to put those inside the chat. Jasmine's mentioning identifying strengths. Lisa, keep it student center. Humanized lessons. That's good. We got a lot of wonderful expertise on the webinar today. Okay. Well, I think I have time to do briefly one more lesson. So I'm going to give it a shot here. I love this quote from Maya Angelou. And the next lesson is, when you know better, do better. Because her quote is, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. So that's a beautiful quote. And it's so true. So when I first came into adult ed, we did not have anywhere near the resources and expertise that we do today. There was just so much that wasn't known. And I always remember being in on the beginning part of, integrating computer technology into adult ed, and I still remember we had this one program, and my mentor in adult said, as you go through and evaluate, these computer programs, go through and get questions wrong and see what it does. And this program, if you missed a question, it would say, no. That cracked me up. I still laugh about that to this day. Things are so much better today than they were in the mid 90s regarding technology. But anyways, when you know better, do better. So many great resources out there. And again, on the handout, there's clickable links to these 3 resources that I'll be mentioning for teaching reading. The teaching adults to read that I have showing there on the screen that you can access. This is really the basis of what STAR was created on the research there about how to teach your students alphabetics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension is based on this. This is a short publication that's designed for the layperson. It's not using educational ease and chi-squared and all that mess. It's designed for the practitioner in adult ed. So that's a great thing. If you want a quick primer, how do I teach my students to read? Boom, that's a great resource there. What about writing? How do we teach students writing? Well, the Just Right Guide, which came out about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, and is just a classic. Dr. Marianne Corley and her staff at Teal this is just a gold mine about great information about, first of all, what to teach students. What does the research say that students should know? What's the research-based best practices? And then finally, how do we do those? How do those look inside the classroom? The Just Right Guide is the right tool to do this, he says, ha, ha, ha. What about teaching math? How do we teach math? And this is a big issue in our field because the research shows that only about 7% of anyone in adult ed has any type of background in math teaching, whether a degree or having taught it in K-12 or what have you. And the MathWorks Guide, again by Teal, came out about 9 years ago, is a great primer on what does the research say on how to teach math and how does this look inside our classroom. Highly recommend those resources there. So much out there. So we've got a lot of good things there. And actually, maybe I will try to sneak in one more since this is a short one, and I think I could do this in a couple minutes. Last lesson that I'm going to do, sorry, we'll only do 6, but again, grab the handout and you can see the other ones. But this is the very first thing that I learned in education, period. And that is that students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I really think I'm preaching to the choir for we adult educators because we care deeply. And so just want to share one brief story. This is Tammy, a student that I worked with back a number of years ago. And when I was working at App State, I got an email from her out of the blue, and the email said, "Hello," and I'm on page 5 of the handout. "Hello, I'm not sure if you remember me, but I wanted to say thank you. I was a high school dropout in 1994. I went to the adult high school program. Then I stopped coming. Working, new mom, marriage, a lot to handle for someone without an education. You'd call me or send me postcards. And for our younger folks, a postcard is a small little piece of pasteboard that people used to send out, put a little stamp on there, and usually people would send them on vacation, like wish you were here, and they'd be in Hawaii or something. Or send me postcards. I'd come back for a while and then quit again. The same old cycle for years. But you never gave up on me for some reason. You kept hounding me. Well, I'm so glad you did. I finished, graduated from the community college, graduated Elizabeth City State University, and she graduated summa cum laude. Wow, I graduated. Thank you, Laude. And now I'm beginning my 7th year of teaching special education. It's been life-changing for me and my family. I just wanted to say thank you for never giving up on me when so many did. You made a difference. You make a difference. Thank you. Thank you." And so if we weren't relentless in our follow-up with Tammy, who knows what would have happened, but we communicated our caring to her by those phone calls and other ways of communication to let her know that we were still in her corner and wanted her to come back and finish, and she did. So whatever we can do inside the classroom to just say, hey, I believe in you. I know this is hard. You can make it. You can do it. I'm here to help. all of those things make a huge difference in the success of our learners. So I am going to go ahead, since I know our time is getting short and I don't want to race quickly through the other ones, but let's see, someone's asking again for the handout link, and but let me do this. And if you're not getting, I'm going to put my, thank you, Geraldine's there. Okay. But I'm going to put my email address here. As I promised earlier, it is also on the handout. If you have any questions or want to follow up in any way from what we talked about today, my email is there. But I want to leave by just saying thank you. I really appreciate everyone being here this afternoon for these lessons in adult ed, and just want to say thank you for the difference that you're making with our students. I know days it's frustrating, and there have been times over the last 31 years where I wanted to quit and throw in the towel and was really frustrated, but take the long view. It is worth it. It is worth it. It is worth it. And a lot of times we don't really understand the difference we make in the lives of our students. It's only when we get, that former student that comes back that says thank you, or we get that email out of the blue, like I did from Tammy. But realize that whether we realize it or not, we're making a difference, and you're making a difference. So keep on keeping on. You may have told your spouse you're going to quit 10 years ago and you're still working, but I was doing a workshop at a local North Carolina program a couple of weeks ago, and I saw someone who I remembered when I worked at App State. I'd worked with her, and she had retired in 2015. And I went up to her and said, "Karen, didn't you retire 6 or 7 years ago?" And she said, "I hate retirement." So retirement's not always what it's cracked up to be. So, but keep on keeping on. And thank you so much for all the work you do. And it was my absolute joy and delight to be with you today. And I am going to turn it back over to Bethel. And thank you again so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Steve. What a great session. I am going to launch a webinar poll. If you could take the poll before you leave, that would be great. And then everyone should receive the recording link and their certificate it's about 24 hours following the live webinar. So I see Robert got back on. Hi, Robert. Would you like to say something?
Just thank you, Steve. That was fantastic. One of the most engaged chat I've seen in almost 10 years of supporting these. So as we still bask in the glory of Adult Education and Family Literacy Week last week, thanks for inspiring us for the rest of the year. And so that's really wonderful. And once again, to everyone there, we'd love, all my colleagues and I would love to help you, give you the boost that we can. Steve gave you great energy. We'd love to help you every other way we can, support you in your programs. And be on the lookout. We have a co-presentation with our good friends at CASAS this Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you haven't registered for that, please hit the COA website. And I look forward, we're going to be talking about data chats and empowering your learners for helping to reach their goals. So thanks, Steve, and back to you, Bethel. Wonderful.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you all on Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.